Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. Hope you enjoy. Story number 1. The Rip Drive, written by Elysium43. It is widely agreed upon fact amongst the United League that Terrans are a unique and unruly species. For proof of that, we need only look at their favorite sports, asteroid jousting and slingshot racing. Both are profusely dangerous and require skill beyond the average United League citizen, or indeed, the average human. However, humans continue to compete in both, using remote control ships to practice, though the real competitions are in person. Annoyingly for some, the effects of the Terran culture and society can be seen slowly creeping into the cultures of some of the newer members of the galactic stage. The professor paused his lecture and looked around. His students, a diverse group made up of most species in the United League, were staring at him intently. He hadn't ever seen them this engaged before, but, he said, I'm not here to tell you about the Terrans and their madness, or their pastimes. I'm here to talk about what sets them apart from us, soul's isolation. While life on Earth was still in its infancy, a freak collision destroyed the Soul Jump Gate, preventing the United Leagues from contacting humanity. Without the intervention of the UL, the Terrans had to learn the lessons of the Great Filters of their own. They very nearly wiped themselves out in the way they call the Third World War, and similarly almost polluted their own world past the point of no return. Somehow, despite the odds stacked against them, the Terrans survived and flourished. First came the colonies on the 4th planet on Sol, then more on the moons of the 5th, and then survey vessels found the wreckage of the Jump Gate. He paused and brought up a picture of the severely destroyed Jump Gate and his visual aid. Despite the damage, the general shape was still recognizable. The ring from which several spires projected out, along the direction that you would enter the gate from. The Terrans studied the gate for almost a decade before they made a working prototype, but they hadn't built a replacement gate. Instead, they built what they called a Rip Drive. I am sure several of you have heard about the Terran FTL before, so allow me to quickly dispel the more popular myths. No, Terrans don't enter Hell to traverse faster than light, nor does the Rip Drive hasten the inevitable heat death of the universe. Finally, there is no evidence that the Terran ship has ever gone to visit the Milky Way's galactic neighbors. With that out of the way, the Terran Rip Drive is very different from the United League jump gates, and has several pros and of course cons when compared. When a ship enters jump gate, they instantly exit the partnered gate without time lost. Comparatively, a Rip Drive will take time in hours that we can calculate it as. He turned and wrote out a formula on the visual aid. The power of 8 root of the distance in meters over the speed of light in meters per second, or s divided by c to the power of 1/8, where s is the displacement of meters, and c is the speed of light in meters per second. Now, some of the more mathematically gifted members of the class might have noticed, according to this formula, it would take a little over 10 hours to cover the distance between Sol and the nearest star to Sol, Proxima Centauri. Which is true. However, the Rip Drive can target any place outside a gravitational well. Assuming a Terran ship has to travel to the edge of the galaxy and attempt to travel to the opposite side of the galaxy, it would take them only a little over 33 hours. A ship traversing the Jump Gate network would take months to do the same trip, losing a couple hours every time they had to cross the system to reach the next gate. The lecturer stopped for a second, turning to check the source of motion that had caught his eye. He was a student, one of the smaller Castian students, holding his arm in the air, a uniquely human gesture. The lecturer humored him. Yes. These Rip Drives seem objectively superior to the gate network. Why didn't we switch over? The student asked. Because they aren't suited to the UL's needs, the lecturer explained. It is very rare for a ship in the United Leagues to need to travel more than a couple of systems. The few ships that do need to, freighters and the like, couldn't get Rip Drives because the Terrans won't give them up. Why not? The student asked. Because Rip Drives are an important part of Terran security. Only Rip Drives can access Sol, as the Terrans continually reject requests and offers to build a gate in their home system. Because of this, should the Terrans ever go to war with the United League, they have an advantage of having an untouchable industrial powerhouse and recruiting center. And, we allow this? A different student, a big and burly Paddock, asked. We should punish them for their insolence. Perhaps, the lecturer began carefully, but I would remind you that the Terran naval forces are comparable to the United League's navy in size, and the Terran warfare technology is superior to the United League. Regardless, he continued, the Terrans enjoy their extra layer of security and do not appear to be giving it freely anytime soon. Of course, the Terrans still make use of the gate analog devices in their colonies, which they call routers. Routers, which get their name from the old Terran device that broadcast wireless signals throughout a building, are essentially planet-side, small gates operated by Terran companies through which signals can be transmitted and received. Terrans use these routers to facilitate real-time communication throughout their empire. Can we not use these to access Sol? The Paddock asked. Only if you know a species that can fit through a hole in space-time smaller than your hand, the professor replied. The holes opened by the routers only need to be big enough to fit electromagnetic waves through, usually waves with 6 to 12 centimeter wavelengths. Do the Terrans not find the 10-hour or more transit time between Sol and their colleagues logistically straining? A Quilician student near the back of the class asked. I can't speak for them, said the professor, but I would imagine not. They're used to it and factored it into the weight when they started those colonies. And besides, they can and do make use of the gate network when it is more convenient to them. But Terran paranoia runs deep. Their history is literally littered with tales of conflict and woe, and they don't believe that just because Terrans have reached the stars that will change anytime soon. So the UL allows them to defend their home system, and in turn Terrans provide the UL with insight gained from studying their gate. But what about, the Rahasian student started to say. I'm afraid that's enough questions for now, the professor said. You all have an assigned reading in your textbooks to complete before the end of the session. If you have any burning questions that can't wait until the Q&A tomorrow, please see me after the session. With a mix of species' unique signs of disappointment, some sighs, some displays of plumage, and one spurt of the sickly green smoke from the high-look student in the corner, the class pulled out bound tomes or digital tablets or tactile registers and began their reading. End of story. Story number 2. Hair is Weird, written by Marilyn of Menny. The little alien clicked his beak for attention and raised his drink. New one, he announced. What's something that most people don't know about you? I'll go first. He passed the horn cup to fruity whatever between his 4 hands while he told the table full of co-workers a secret. The firstborn in his clutch of siblings had died in the egg, and he should have been the secondus, not the primus. My parents decided that it was best to pretend that it was the quadratus that had died, and bumped the rest of us forward. He looked down at the table, his head pulled back towards the shell like he was worried that they would judge him harshly. But of course, we didn't. The other Turtellos had all comforting things to say, and we drank a toast to his parents' decision. I raised my own cup and non-alcoholic juice with the rest of them, trying not to elbow anyone in the ear with my long human limbs. There would be no alcohol for me here, as one of the few representatives of my entire planet. That was okay with me. The juice tasted better anyway. The next speaker was a little female who had joined us recently from a different city. She pointed out a chunk of missing shell that everyone pretended not to have noticed. What I'd guessed to be a hovercar accident or a childhood tumble turned out to be a battle scar from a heroic moment when she faced down a sizable predator to save her neighbor's pet. That's what started me on the path of animal care, she said. There was a hearty round of applause. I clapped too, quietly so that not to put anyone off with the slapping sound of my scaleless hands. While she'd been talking, I had removed the 2 hair ties anchoring my long braid. Now the brown hair spilled down my back, but none of the shorter aliens had noticed yet. I held up a hand with the bright blue hair ties looped around my thumb. Me next, I said. The various faces looked up at me. Before they could say anything, I splayed my hair around my shoulders like a cobra and spread my arm. Surprise! Their reactions were great. Twitches of startlement and some very white eyes. They all tried to hide this, of course, some claiming that they had realized early on that my braid was simply long fur. They just hadn't thought that it would look like that when let down. I hammed it up for the curious eyes, spreading a wave of shiny brown hair around myself like a cloak, then gathering it up again and letting it fall. My very professional co-workers did their best to hide the childish amazement at the exotic display. Even when I wove it back into a braid, their eyes followed my fingers in the dance that I did every morning. A fellow human had suggested before I left Earth that cutting my hair short would be the practical decision. I'm sure that it would have been, but this was absolutely worth it. The kids call me the tall alien with the head tentacle, which is something that a 10-year-old me would have laughed out loud about. And I get to surprise the dignified adults too, which is always a bonus. End of story. I would just quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and patrons. Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Barkey, It's Difficult to Pronounce, Lord Azrakul, and Arcadian.